Hey everyone, so this is now our final video in this particular series, and what we're going to do here is we're going to tie together everything we've learnt so far about addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and we're going to talk about what we call the order of operations. Now, I've written a question here, 5 plus 2 times 3, and I want to just take a little bit of a look at this. Now, when we look at this particular expression, it's got numbers, it's got some operators as well, so adding and multiplying, but we don't really know what order to go about this, right? Because looking at this, it kind of looks like there's two ways we can go. Am I doing 5 plus 2 first and then timesing by 3? Or am I doing the 2 times 3 first and then adding a 5? Like, how do we even go about this? We don't really have too much clarity when we get a question like this. And the reason we want to talk about this is because we want some kind of order here. We want there to be no doubt that there is kind of one correct way to go about this. We don't want in maths any room for sort of interpretation of, well, this I can do this way, I can do this thing another way, and I get two different answers. Because if I actually go through these, 5 plus 2, that gives me 10. Oh, sorry, 5 plus 2. 5 times 2 would give me 10. 5 plus 2 gives me 7 times 3. This gives me 21. Now, this one here, 2 times 3 gives me 6, plus 5 gives me 11. So which one's actually correct here? We can't have two answers for just one mathematical expression, right? So here's where we have to take a little bit of a deeper look into the order in which we compute things of this nature, where we have more than one operation being done. Here we're adding and multiplying here. So we need an order. Now, when I was in school, we in Australia used this thing called BODMAS. Now, I'm not going to go straight into this because I don't want us all to get into a habit of just memorizing some mnemonics like this and then just not really knowing why it kind of works. On this channel, we like to delve in a little bit deeper here. So I'm going to first look at this question a bit deeper and then look at the order in which we did. And I'm going to link it back to this idea of BODMAS, which I learned in school. So that pretty much stood for brackets. So the order we do things first, we have brackets, always do those first. And we have an order, and this had division, multiplication. Division, multiplication. And this was addition, subtraction. Now, I've laid this out. It was only afterwards that me personally, had to go in and figure out, well, why is this that? A lot of the times you're just given this thing BODMAS, or in some other countries you may use a different one, but we don't really explore why this is the actual case here. So let's dig a little bit deeper, and then I'll get back to my idea of BODMAS. We'll tie it all back in together. So looking at this question again, that was 5 plus 2 times 3. Now, if you remember in one of my previous videos, when we talked about multiplication, we mentioned that this was just a type of shorthand for addition. So, because mathematicians are lazy, we don't like writing too much out, right? We want to make our lives easier wherever we can. So, instead of, say, adding, you know, 10 9 times, we can take 9 lots of 10. And then this is where multiplication kind of comes into play. So, on this side, I'm just going to write, well, 2 lots of 3, 2 times 3, I can write that. Multiplication tells us that I can write this as either 3 plus 3. I'm taking 2 lots of this 3. I have 1 lot of 3, a second lot of 3. I can rewrite this as 2 times 3. And I can also write this as 3 lots of 2. So I can say that this is the same as saying 2 plus 2 plus 2. So in the end, my multiplication here always results in some kind of addition. So this particular thing here, 2 lots of 3, this is like writing, well, my 5, and this is like writing my 2 lots of 3 as, let me just fix the position of this. This is like saying 5 plus, and 2 times 3 is like saying 3 plus 3. So getting from here to down here, that's just the definition of multiplication. Multiplication, we can think of it as almost a shorthand or an abbreviation to adding certain things. If I add 3 and 3, I can also just say that's like taking 2 lots of 3. Now, when I get this, I'm going to end up, well, 3 plus 3, that gives me 6. I'm going to end up with 6. And 5 is going to get added here. And I'm left with 11. So out of the 2 options we had up here, well, which one's going to be the correct one? Well, this one on the right here. And that tells us that the first thing we should do is going to be multiplying, because the very last thing we did was to add everything together. See, we worked through this multiplication here. We wrote that in a more simple way. Oh, sorry, not a more simple way, but we wrote that in another definition of, we wrote that in another way. So instead of writing 2 times 3, we just wrote 3 plus 3. And the last thing we did was add all these things together. So the order in which we do things matters. And we can see from this example that we need to multiply before we add and subtract. And the same thing happens for division too. So let's try another example, and we're going to look at how we can work through these types of things. So question 2, I have 6 plus 10 divided by 2. Now, based on our order of operations that I introduced earlier, multiplication and division kind of go hand in hand. We always want to work through those first and then move on to addition and subtraction at the end. And there's another question that I'm going to put right at the end, which is going to give us a nice comprehensive all-round view of this. So with these things here, I want to work first with my division here, because we said before that what everything ended up being reduced to was adding right at the end from this first example. So I'm going to, in working with this question, do my division first. So if I divide 10 by 2, what does that give me? That gives me 5. And then to that, I am going to add my 6. So based on the order of operations, what we talked about in the last example, my division has to go first. And now when I add these two things, because I'm adding last, 6 plus 5 gives me 11. Coincidentally, the same answer as the question before. So once we understand why this works, we can go back to our BODMAS here, and we can use this. Now you can kind of have a look at this and go, all right, cool. Now I understand how it works. So now I can just use this thing here, and then that's like a good way to remember it. But another problem with this particular thing, this BODMAS abbreviation, is it implies that division comes before multiplication and addition comes before subtraction. That's actually not true. We want to group these in terms of we group these in terms of levels. So we have our brackets, and then we treat division and multiplication in the same way. No matter which one of those we choose first, we will get the same answer. And I'll show that to you in the next question. And addition and subtraction, the order actually doesn't matter. We're going to get to the same thing. So let's do one more question here. And this is going to be question 3. I have 18 minus 2 times 4 plus 6 divided by 5. Now, in this particular question, we have every single operation used here. We have subtraction, we have multiplication, we have brackets, we have addition, and we have division. So this is a nice big question just to get us used to working with all of these. Now, this looks really scary, but if we follow our order of operations, we can break it down quite easily. So I said before in a previous video that when we had brackets here, brackets are kind of like a highlighter. They highlight something of importance. They tell us pretty much this should be treated, my 4 plus 6, the answer to that should be treated like its own number. So I'm going to always do my brackets first. Now, taking these brackets here, I get 4 plus 6 gives me 10. Now, I'm going to rewrite my working because I want to show every step. 2 times 10 divided by 5. Now, when we get here, what we want to do next is not the subtraction, that comes at the end. We want to either multiply or divide next. And I'm going to show you 2 separate ways we can go with this. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure type of thing, if any of you remember those books back in the day. I'm going to approach this in 2 separate ways. Now, one of them is going to be doing the multiplication first. So I'm going to do that here on the left-hand side. So I get 18 minus 2 times 10 gives me 20 divided by 5. And on this side, I'm going to divide first, just to show you guys that we get the same answer. So 18 minus 2 times 10 divided by 5 gives me 2. So here I get 18 minus, and I want to do the division first. So 20 divided by 5 gives me 4. 18 minus 2 times 2 gives me 4. So you can already see between here and here that we're going to arrive at the same destination. We're going to get the same answer. So 18 minus 4 gives me 14. 18 minus 4 gives me 14. So in approaching a massive question like this, when it has every single operation here, we have a systematic approach. Now we can refer to our BODMAS mnemonic that we talked about previously. Now, this is just to remind us, okay, which way do we sort of want to go? But every single time we approach these types of questions, we want to first consider the brackets. And we want to compute the brackets first. The second thing is we want to work with the multiplication and the division. And then third, we work with our addition and subtraction. And this gives us a system and an order which leaves no doubt. So even when we got to this stage, we still kind of spoke in the same language and got the same answer, as opposed to this first question that we considered, where there was too much ambiguity. It could have gone either way. We didn't have an actual system in place to work with this. So we wound up with two different answers. But now that we have introduced and worked with our orders of operations, our BODMAS here, we can work with any level of difficulty question a lot more comfortably, as long as we follow our steps, which are, once again, consider the brackets and compute those. We want to multiply and divide after that, do any multiplication and any division that we have left, and then finally we add and subtract. Thanks so much for watching, guys. That brings us to the end of our series, and I will see you in the next one.